and it's going to be recording soon. And I won't bring up, Pittsburgh Steelers losing terribly, undramatic fashion, and I definitely won't bring up the Packers losing either, Isaac. So, you don't have to. We don't have to go over that very sensitive topics. Oh shoot,
that's
we're
old
recording.
News, man. Yeah,
we're
that's
recording.
Old news. Forget that.
Okay, welcome to episode 279 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendall. Joining me, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I am just fine. I did not jump into the big Reddit swarm of the GameStop stock the other day, and I guess that makes me either foolish or extremely wise. And as the minutes pass, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, we'll find out like tomorrow, I'm sure. Isaac Orr, policy fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. How are you?
I'm good. I also did not partake, but I am cheering for the, the renegade traders.
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely like the topic of this week.
For sure, it has to be.
We put together this episode, and primarily we're going to talk about Joe Biden's energy policies so far, just like a week into his administration. Whether it's the Keystone Oil Pipeline stuff or the potential of him declaring a climate emergency. I do want to talk about that because that's kind of in our purview. We got Isaac Orr, kind of an expert on the energy sector, so got to use our resources as we can, but hey, I mean, we got to talk about this, right?
We really do. And frankly, like the pipeline and energy stuff, that's going to be evergreen.
Sure.
This is potentially huge.
Yeah.
Well, is anyone going to explain what's going on for the many listeners who are not up to speed?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to ask you guys, I was going to start off this segment, like, hey, did you guys hear about this? But like, it's everywhere, you know? So what essentially happened, and I'm probably going to get some of the details wrong, so viewers, forgive me for this, but the sentiment will be correct. So what essentially happened was the communities online, whether it was a subreddit called Wall Street Bets or 4chan or probably a couple of other ones as well, they realized that there was a whole lot of put options against GameStop stock. So this is then a bunch of hedge funds and investors just assuming that the price of GameStop was going to continue to plummet stock-wise. So once these communities online kind of realized this, and realize if they got enough people to invest in this and buy GameStop options or stock, then that would increase the price of the stock, which would basically meet these thresholds that are above where the people are betting on against the stock. And when that happens, and this is where I'm probably going to get the details a little hazy here, the investment firms that have these put options, basically predicting that the betting on that the stock was going to continue to go down.
Yep.
They had to buy at these certain levels. So it created this cascading effect that once they started buying this stock at these certain levels, it started pushing it up further past other thresholds of put options, which is this cascading effect that sent the GameStop stock from $4 or something to, I think at the height of it, and I don't know, maybe we'll see a bigger height tomorrow. I'm recording this on Thursday, but at the height of it was earlier today, $500 a share.
Yeah, I think 469 it topped out at.
Yeah, so these people on Reddit, Wall Street Bets or 4chan are buying these shares at $4 and are potentially cashing in at $500, whereas these hedge funds, which were totally invested in these put options against GameStop,
they're betting against GameStop for sure,
are on the hook for billions of dollars. So this obviously, when I first heard about this, which maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was 2 days ago. But it was just it was my brother told me about it. And I was like, okay, this is just one of those things that people talk about on Reddit. And that's about it. Little did I know that this was going to be national news just a couple of days later. And not only is this thing humongous, but these online communities seem to be targeting other potential cash cows of investments. Nokia's one, AMC was another. I think BlackBerry was another.
BlackBerry.
Right. There's a couple of other ones too. So it's Where's the end of this? I don't know.
It's like a revenge game against the fat cats of Wall Street, right? And so,
It's-
if you're a hedge fund manager, what stock would you think is going to reduce in value, even just in the narrow short term? GameStop, which sells video games in cartridges when you have to come in and get them. I mean, that's a dead industry. You might as well be Blockbuster or have VCR tapes or something. And then what else? BlackBerry. It's like, does anybody use BlackBerries anymore? No, they all have their iPhones and their Galaxy, Samsungs, and all that stuff. And so, and then AMC was another one. The theater chain, that was another one that was picked by the Wall Street hedge fund giants to decrease in value. Of course, it was going to decrease in value because nobody can go to the movies because there's lockdown everywhere. And in fact, we talked about this on the podcast before. The future of those big theater chains is really, really bleak because COVID, and it was already happening naturally, but COVID has very much changed the way people think about the way they're going to consume new movies. And they're not going to go to the theaters as much anymore. So that was another great stock to short, meaning it was going to lose its value. And so what do these Wall Street bets people do? In these Reddit threads, they decided, hell with those those short sellers. Let's buy all that stuff because you have to buy. The idea is you buy it at say $60, and you predict in 3 weeks' time it'll be $30, and so you end up making money on the deal, right? And so they decided no, because they have to buy it back. See, you make a contract to buy that stock back, and so when everybody started buying that, the AMC stock or the GameStop stock, instead of having to buy it at what they expected to be $30, it ended up being $300 or $350 a share or $500 a share. And so what I think it was $14.6 billion was lost by hedge funds across the world, or maybe even just across America. $14.6 billion
God, it's so
bled out of hedge fund managers in one day between Wednesday and now as it is Thursday. And so that's it's actually kind of funny. It's basically, guys on Reddit just decided to screw around with the stock market and basically just screw around with hedge fund managers. Let's see if we can do this, guys. Come on, let's go do this together. And they actually did it. Well, it's amazing. But yet now the thing is now they want to change all the rules. In fact, they've rigged the game again to screw over everybody. And that's
I do want to get
a bigger story here.
Yeah, and I do want to get to that because I do think that's kind of that's actually why I wanted to bring all this up. But
exactly,
Jim, you brought this up when we were talking about it yesterday, which was like this is essentially the plot of Trading Spaces, and just switch out put options.
Places.
Trading Places, right?
Trading Places, right? Yes.
Switch out, put options on GameStop instead of like futures on orange juice or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's right. And then there's that great scene. In fact, I've seen the meme on Twitter and other places where the two, what is it, Mortimer, and I forget the other guy's name, on Trading Places, the great classic comedy, of course, from the 80s with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, where they say, turn the machines back on, because they had lost all their money and they wanted the machines to come back on so that they could make the trades they needed to make to not be bankrupt. And basically that's what Big Wall Street did on Thursday morning. They the big hedge funds yelled, turn those machines back on, and they did. And then they turned the machines on and they rigged the machines so that you could only sell GameStop and AMC and some of these other stocks and no longer buy them. In other words, they basically just cut the knees off from this entire project, which was to drive the stock of GameStop up, whether it was to punish the hedge fund managers or just to go ahead and make your own money by, they played by the rules, and then Wall Street and frankly our federal government changed the rules in the middle of the game to make sure that the hedge fund guys won and what they call retail investors lost.
Right. And like the thing is, like who cries tears for Wall Street or these giant hedge funds or anything like that? It's just like, oh, these people on Reddit kind of figured out your game that you guys have been probably doing for the last like several decades, and like,
oh yeah, they trot people out on CNBC to talk about stocks all the time, right? So like, this is their own game, and we figured out how to beat them. And not me personally, my friend did. My friend got it. He bought GameStop when it was $113.
Oh wow!
And I think he sold it at a couple hundred or something.
He was still kind of late to the game. Yeah, I'm on a couple of different group chats where it's just like, oh, it's Nokia time. Jump on Nokia. Oh, it's AMC. You got to get some AMC stocks.
Yeah,
it's gone viral. This thing has gone viral,
Well,
but
our producer Andy isn't on the podcast today, but he actually, and he won't mind me saying, he bought a share of stock for $300 something, and and he's like, let's see what happens. He ended up selling. He made $90 overnight.
Oh, good.
Right? He sold it right away. So good for him. He made $90. But to him, it wasn't even about obviously making any money on this deal. Although there were people that, you look on Reddit or you look on Twitter, and people who actually started trading that GameStop stock early had made tens of thousands of dollars. They bought homes. They paid for the health care for their sister who needed to have Lyme disease treated. They paid off the mortgage of their parents' home. So some good things came of this. But Andy was like, I have $300 to spare in my Robinhood account. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Because he just wanted to be part of it, right? You want to be part of that experience. That's kind of what made this whole thing go viral and go crazy, was that people just wanted to be a part of it. You could spend $350 on a Coachella experience or something, right? Go to a concert. Or you could participate in basically the storming of the gates of Wall Street. And it was a pretty good $300 investment for Andy, I would suppose. And he made $90 out of it overnight. Right. So good for him.
Yeah. It's just so great knowing that the stock market is a zero-sum game. If somebody wins, someone else loses, and that a hedge fund lost $13 billion, and now that's all just going out to the Reddit folk. Like the Robinhood traders got that $13 billion, and it's beautiful. It really is.
Well, okay, so and if that was the end of the story, then it's like a super interesting story, and let's see if it's got legs, and if the same thing is going to happen in the future. Certainly, hedge funds that saw them bleeding billions of dollars will take actions to make sure that they're not going to be over leveraged against AMC or something like that. That would be an interesting story in itself, right? But what's happened and kind of the response, the fallout to all of this, I think is kind of the more alarming thing to me. Okay. So you've got Robinhood, right? This is this app that people have used to just kind of buy options and stocks or whatever on just kind of an individual basis without going through some type of stockbroker or anything like that. But in the kind of the fallout of all of this, you have seen Robinhood specifically, and I think to a lesser extent, other investment apps, taking actions to prevent this from exacerbating. So one thing, they delisted some of the stocks GameStop and AMC, and I think Nokia as well. So even if you had the app and you have an account, you can't even find the stock to buy it. And some of them, Jim, you were saying that you weren't even given an option to buy it anymore. You could sell it if you want, right, but you can't buy it anymore.
And in other words, you could do what you could sell it. You could do what the hedge fund managers were trying to do, but you couldn't buy anymore to drive it up. That's
and then certain online communities have been kind of shut down. Wall Street Bets on Reddit went private, and I think that was their own doing. I don't think that was something foisted upon them.
No, but there was a shut down first for a very brief period of time, and then they went private.
Well, they've got their own little Discord, which is kind of like a private chat that you have to kind of be invited into. That was shut down by Discord. Mm-hmm. And then the SEC is looking into this. There's some collusion going on. So it's again, these people, these Redditors, these online communities kind of figured out the game and how to exploit it. And now we're going to change all of the rules and stuff. And my thought was, especially when you see these online communities being kind of shut down or censured, at least, it was this just reminded me of Parler getting shut down. And their justification for that was that Parler was supposedly used to help coordinate this a siege on the Capitol building. It's well, what was this? This was not some siege on the Capitol building. This was people on Reddit figuring out how to make money at the expense of these hedge funds. So what's the justification for the changing of the rules here? I don't get it.
Because the people in power are getting what they don't want to get. Yeah, they're getting what they don't want to get, right? So that's the whole thing. It's
and they're getting it good and hard.
Yeah. And it's great. It's awesome. Tax rich? No way. Take the money from them, from their hedge funds, because they bet against GameStop, the greatest chain of all time. Do it. Just take it.
It's important to note here that these people on Reddit and Wall Street Bets and all these people that bought one share of stock or hundreds of shares of stock at certain price, none of these people that participated in this did anything illegal.
Right.
You know, there were lots of illegal activity at the storming of the Capitol, for instance, trespassing, the least among them, assault, and you know, awful, terrible. But actual crimes were committed. Nobody that participated in this little, you know, storming of Wall Street did anything illegal. This was all within the rules.
Yeah.
And yet overnight, the entire system came down on their heads, just like you said, like they did on Parler. Parler actually was not even used to organize the Capitol siege on the Capitol. Parler was not a part of that. Facebook and Twitter were, but Parler was destroyed. But they played by the rules, they followed the rules, and then when they woke up the next morning, the system changed the rules and made it so that they basically, as I said in the beginning, just cut their knees out from under them. This would be like, the Super Bowl's coming up in 2 weeks, right? And let's just say at halftime, Patrick Mahomes has been passing all over the place, and the Chiefs are up 27-10, and the NFL at halftime decides, you know what? I don't like that. That is not good for the NFL. That's not good for Tom Brady. So we are changing the rules for the second half. Patrick Mahomes is not allowed to throw any passes. The forward pass has been outlawed for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right.
But Tom Brady, you get to keep on passing. That's cool. You get to do what you want to do. Oh, and by the way, the Chiefs defense, you have to count 5 Mississippi before you start your pass rush against Tom Brady. Sure. That is basically, in a sports analogy, what happened on Wall Street today. And it is outrageous. And it is, once again, the system protecting itself from those who dare to actually play by the rules, but use those rules to counter what the system and the powerful actually want to have happen. It's happening on social media, and it happened on Wall Street. And whether you like chaos or not, sometimes the system needs a little chaos so that it can be exposed to the people who are not paying attention to this stuff, exactly how corrupt the system is.
Well, to me, it's the commonality between all of this and the Parler thing is just like the establishment, the power of the establishment was being challenged. So what do? They change the rules, you know, like we've heard forever, like you don't like Twitter, make your own Twitter. Okay. Yeah, we did. Parler. Nope. Shut it down. Right. You can't.
Yeah, they were okay. They were okay with you doing your own thing as long as it didn't matter.
Right.
As long as it's going to be so insignificant that, yeah. But as soon as you actually have an alternative or are able to give them what they don't want, then they really change the rules.
Right. So I'll be very curious to see what happens. It almost seems like there's a bit of a kind of a seismic shift going on. Like,
yeah, it does.
When you see like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump Jr. agreeing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez
and Rashida Tlaib, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, about like how it seems like Wall Street is kind of making up the rules as they go along, and all these like vested interests that are being protected. Like, you don't see that very often. So I'm very curious to see how all of this plays out. Robinhood is being sued, class action lawsuit, because they say it's unfair that you delisted this, and there's some conflict of interest things that I've read about as well with their decision to do that. But yeah, I'll be very curious to see how all this shakes out. Like this seems less of like a little anomalous story on the back page of the New York Post or something like that, and it's like turned into front page news pretty quickly.
Yeah, you had it really fast. By the way, AOC actually tweeted to Ted Cruz, he can sit this one out because you tried to have me murdered on January 6th. So,
well, she is a lunatic. So we have to put that exclamation mark on that, of course. But
but no, this goes exactly right. We've been talking about this for weeks. Hey bro, make your own Google. Hey bro, make your own Facebook. Hey bro, you don't like it, make your own Twitter. And then you kind of do, and then those get destroyed by the system. And now we're at hey man, make your own Wall Street. It's like, are we allowed to participate in this society or not? And apparently the answer keeps coming up not, and I'm getting quite sick of it.
We live in a society. Yeah, well, I don't know. Isaac, do you have anything else you want to kind of talk about this, or anything that you're kind of expecting to happen over the next week?
I don't know. Like, this is all just kind of hit me. I learned what a short was this morning. So like I'm very interested in like participating in it moving forward if, the Biden administration will allow it, because apparently they jumped in on it. Like they're monitoring the situation very closely. But the Wall Street Journal had a really interesting article on this morning, and that said on Wednesday, GameStop shares hit a high of $380, briefly giving the video game retailer a market value of $26.5 billion, more than Delta Airlines.
Yeah.
This is the greatest troll job ever.
Where else are you going to go when you want to buy a used copy of, Gran Turismo 4?
That's right. That's right. They should have cashed in their stock, man. They'd be millionaires, obviously, 26 times over.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
If you think that the Biden administration is merely monitoring this situation, that's also naive. You're telling me that Janet Yellen did make some calls to her friends on Wall Street, the brand new female Secretary of the Treasury, which has been emphasized the female part quite often by the White House. You think she wasn't on the phone with her hedge fund buddies and with the SEC, and they're just monitoring it from afar, figuring out what's going to happen? Look, we got to let the market play out. No. We'll soon find out. They will be reporting soon, I imagine, that the White House was actually quite involved with basically cutting the knees out from under retail investors who were playing by the rules and trying to participate in Wall Street and being shut out right when things were getting good.
Right. I think it's cute. You think the press is going to report on it?
Not the mainstream press. You'll see it reported. You'll see it. It'll be reported and it'll be the truth. But you won't watch it on NBC News. Let's just say that.
Yeah. And what about Robinhood? What a dirtbag company!
Did you see they got flooded with 1-star reviews, like hundreds of thousands of them? If you go look up their app, it's a 1-star right now.
Really? Because I tried to go there and leave one earlier, and it looked like Apple had disabled the review function.
Of course they did.
I don't know. And I just want to let everybody know I'm not tech savvy, so maybe that was just me being an idiot, and that's totally a possibility. But
definitely a possibility.
Make your own review website.
Exactly. So when I go to Robinhood, learn investing, it still has a 5-star app and 2.4 million reviews. But it does not look like
Google App Store earlier today, and it was a 1-star.
Okay, yeah. So I'm in the Apple App Store, and I do not think that they're allowing people to leave a review.
They probably retroactively deleted everything in the last 24 hours.
They probably did. Yeah, for sure.
Other things.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just crazy how big tech and Wall Street and all these things are just colluding together. And that's what I love about this story. It's just like a bunch of people who had their $600 stimulus checks laying around. And they really stuck it to all of them. I mean, one of the reasons there was a CNN article that said how Trumpism explains Wall Street bets, and it was actually pretty good. It was like Trump positioned himself as a giant middle finger to the elites, and he said, "Vote for me, and I'll stick it to them." And that's what this was in a lot of ways. So,
it'll be interesting. I'm sure that there's going to be more fallout to come. I don't know exactly what that's going to entail, but I'm sure that organizations like the Heartland Institute and other kind of free market things will be keeping an eye on it and a finger on the pulse of it. So this probably won't be the end of the story, and we'll probably talk about it in episodes to come. But
sure. Well, the SEC said that they didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing illegal about whipping everybody into a frenzy on Reddit. If they were being dishonest or something like that, then it would be. But if they're just really excited about it,
couldn't one big investor have done what all of these people that came together and did? Couldn't Warren Buffett have single-handedly done this? Just by buying a ton of stock in GameStop. So it's just because all of these people that aren't a part of the establishment did it. Now it's a bad thing. That's how it comes off. Now, of course, I'm just kind of like a layman, when it comes to all of this stuff. I don't know the nuances of it, so I could be totally misreading some of this, but it just seems like you guys got involved in our game, and it's our game. You guys can't be a part of it, so get out.
Yeah,
that's how it comes off to me.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. I just hope the Wall Street Bets group goes for the Michael Scott Paper Company next. That would be the best. Let's make the Michael Scott Paper Company the biggest paper company in the world.
Right.
Only Donnie cares that I made that joke, but all right.
Yeah, no, nobody else understands that, but that's fine. That's fine. All right, well, let's talk about...
I watched The Office last year for the first time, so I remember that joke.
Okay.
I just didn't think it was very funny. I get it. It's fine.
I was on mute because I was looking at my TD Ameritrade to see if I could get in on this stuff.
No. TD Ameritrade did the same thing Robinhood did.
I looked, and it looks like I can. It looks like I can get into some sweet GameStop now on my.
You can buy it, huh?
TD, right?
Watch this, like all of a sudden, like GameStop becomes like this Goliath in like in like retail. Like they become the next like Best Buy or something like that, or Target. Like it's just humongous. You're buying your groceries from GameStop in the future.
Right. This is just the capital. This is just the capital investment GameStop needed to reset its business plan. Who's to say any different, right? I mean, imagine what they can do with this.
Just wait until Nokia blows up, and then you're going to see a new competitor to the Apple iPhone, the Google Pixel.
Maybe GameStop buys Sony PlayStation, or buys the Xbox property off of Microsoft with all this capital. You never know.
Yeah, right. Who knows? We will see. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about some Joe Biden energy policy stuff. He's been in office for a week? Has it been about a week, a little over a week now? And he seems to be making a lot of ripples. I've seen that like some chart, and this could be wrong. It was just shared on social media, but it seemed right. Is that like he's issued 19 executive orders in the first 3 days of his presidency, compared to like your average of the last 4 presidents put together of 2. So he seems like he's not waiting, to kind of jump in. And one of the things that he's really jumping into is kind of these energy topics. So, Isaac, you are the energy guy. What do you think would be a good, logical place to kind of start this conversation? Because I do want to talk about the possibility of declaring a climate emergency. We can get into the Keystone XL Pipeline stuff. Where do you want to start?
Listen, Jack, let's start with the Keystone Pipeline, because I don't understand how that pipeline didn't get built during the Trump administration. I think that they tried to get it done, but the permitting process just takes forever. But this is really the crux of the argument. Like, a lot of people said, oh, well, Biden's going to ban fracking, and he will on federal lands if he can, right? But the majority of the oil that's produced due to fracking is on private lands. So he really doesn't have a whole lot of authority with that. But he can restrict the flow of oil and make sure that we don't have enough pipelines to get the stuff to market at a profitable rate. So the Keystone Pipeline, Pete Stauber is a congressman up in northern Minnesota. He said it took Biden 5 hours to kill thousands of union jobs. Right. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, I remember in 2015 when we were talking about the Keystone Pipeline, and that was a long time ago now.
Sure.
Obama's Secretary of State said this is not going to meaningfully impact CO2 emissions globally, because if they don't have the pipeline, they're going to send it via rail down to the United States. So, but they delayed it anyway because they could, sure. And it was political. And, it was really funny. There was a lady here who represents like unions, and she was like so devastated by this. And she was like, I can't believe that he did this. I was like, are you serious? And, I didn't rub it in too bad then, because, obviously this person wanted to believe that Biden was some sort of moderate and was going to be reasonable on energy policy, and like acknowledge that most of the energy we use every day comes from oil and natural gas. But hey, you know what? Buyer beware. Should have been more beware. I'm very ready to be callous right now.
Yeah. I don't know. Like it's just like, okay, so what are the job situations? Because I'm seeing kind of conflicting reports. Some are suggesting that it's like 1,000 jobs. Others suggesting that it was 10,000 union jobs that are kind of thrown out because of Joe Biden's decision here. What's the reality here?
So I think it was 1,000 jobs stopped working on the pipeline, but that would lead to future losses in jobs. So there were other jobs that needed to get done in order to make the pipeline a reality. And now they're talking about scrapping the pipeline, like selling it for scrap metal, which is a total waste, right? I mean, if we're going to use this oil, we might as well let Alberta, our friends to the north, make a profit on it. I mean, that's what the whole thing is. Like, the whole government has become so symbolic in a lot of ways, to where they're just happy to do stuff like this, even if it hurts everyday people.
You were saying before, I think the last time we were talking about this, that Canada is going to be developing this oil, and they're going to be extracting this oil and gas anyways. Like, it's going to, the Keystone Pipeline is just like the transit for it.
Yes.
That's because I've heard that like there's people in Canada. I don't know if it was Trudeau or something like that. They were like really upset over like Biden's decision here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so
like 48 hours, and then they got over it.
Well, aren't they? I didn't look into this a whole lot, admittedly. I've had a lot of other stuff on my plate recently, so like the Keystone Pipeline isn't really in my my wheelhouse anymore. But I believe that they're looking at the Transcanada Pipeline now. So the Canadian government may be building a pipeline through the mountains, through the Rockies, to ship Albertan oil to British Columbia, so they can put it on a tanker and then sell it to refineries in the United States.
Oh,
so
great!
Or send it to China.
Right. So they're figuring out alternative ways to ship it, but like the geography there is a little bit more tenuous than the oil pipeline. Like there's more of those, like if you look at a map of Washington State, there's all those little rocky islands there. It's the same thing off the coast of BC. So like the route is a bit more treacherous from an environmental standpoint than a pipeline going. Yeah. It's much more treacherous. I mean, I don't know, like with today's technology, there might be GPS on all those oil tankers and they know exactly where they need to go. Right. So, but I don't know that. But if you're worried about an oil spill getting to the ocean, then having a pipeline go across the Canadian Rockies to the Pacific Ocean to put it on a tanker and then sell it to the United States anyway does not seem like the best possible solution to the problem.
It just, it seems like this is one of these like red meat things for like the left. But it seems like he's stepping on a whole lot of toes by making this decision.
Yeah, it's definitely a tofu issue for them.
Yeah, the Keystone Pipeline, Keystone XL Pipeline was like this magic talisman that they had to destroy. Like at the end of some movie or something, where you get the amulet, from around the neck of the villain, and then you smash it with a rock, right? And you take away all the magic powers from the villain, right? I think that's the way the environmental left has always looked at the Keystone XL Pipeline. The Keystone XL Pipeline, I think, Isaac, they had at least 125 miles constructed. Okay. And it's mostly underground, so it's very safe. And tens of thousands of people were working on this project. And when Biden announced that, I'm going to cancel the Keystone XL Pipeline, initially that weirdo prime minister they have up there in Canada, Justin Trudeau, was made some noises saying, this is not good. We had a deal. And then they basically got over it in about 24 to 48 hours and didn't make us think about it anymore. But yeah, all that oil is coming out of the tar sands of Alberta one way or the other. It does not matter whether the Keystone XL Pipeline exists or doesn't. And a lot of it is going to come to the United States, as Isaac said, in much, much more treacherous ways, by magnitudes of hundreds, than it is to put it on that pipeline. Not only is it more efficient, but it's much, much safer. There are, trains that have. There's actually one of our friends here in Arlington Heights, Illinois, who used to come to the events that we would have when we had events, and we have to have them again soon when we are fully out of COVID panic. But the trains that move oil from Canada to the south for refining come right through here in Illinois, in northern Illinois, right through Arlington Heights. In fact, near the guy's house, he saw that. He was sitting behind it and saw 300, he said 300, maybe exaggerated a little, but he saw many, many, many oil. That's all it was, 4 engines and all oil tankers. And when these things derail, they cause enormous environmental catastrophes and fires, and they kill people. It wasn't too long ago, Isaac, you might remember this, when you were paying really close attention to it. I think there was an accident in Canada, not here, but in Canada, that killed many people, pretty much destroyed an entire neighborhood. I guess to hell with that, because the Keystone XL Pipeline represented in some sick imaginary way for the environmental left of something they had to defeat to convince themselves that they were saving the planet, that they were doing something to fight back against big oil. Let's cancel this pipeline. But they're actually going to end up causing more environmental damage, because that oil is coming out one way or another. And we hadn't even mentioned the fact that guess what those tankers that will be picking up the oil, perhaps in British Columbia, guess what they're fueled with? They're not giant sails on those huge tankers. They're fueled by oil. by diesel oil.
Right.
What about the trains that come through here? They're also fueled by fossil fuel, diesel oil. So instead of just putting the oil in a pipeline and not using any additional energy relative to its volume to get it down to have it refined, instead you have to use all this more fossil fuels, putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere if you care about that. And so not only is it dumb, not only is it kind of like slaying an imaginary dragon, but it's also actually observably and without any dispute making the environment worse. It's making it worse and will for many years to come. And again, they don't care. It's a representation of their religion. This is the scalp they demanded from Joe Biden, and he gave it to him.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Isaac.
It's just great that the union for the pipeline workers endorsed Joe Biden. It's just like, how could you be so stupid? Like
I did not see that coming.
I think a lot of the members did. And I think that the union heads and the people that run these things are still super in the tank because, they're getting rich off of it. But when I talk to people that work in the iron mines up in northern Minnesota, like I think the steelworkers union also said that they endorsed Biden, but most of those guys were Trump people. So there's a disconnect between union membership and the people that run the unions now.
Jim, who is the person that was like, oh yeah, the people that were building the pipeline, they're just going to have to learn how to build solar panels.
Yeah. I was just pulling that quote up. That was John Kerry. He said, so yesterday, I guess Wednesday, the day before that we're recording this podcast, I guess was Climate Change Day at the White House. It's themed days, like there's parties or something. So John Kerry, on Biden putting oil and gas workers out of work, quote, what President Biden wants to do is make sure those folks have better choices, that they have alternatives. They can be the people to go work to make the solar panels.
Oh, good.
Well, isn't that nice? This is from a guy who is the second husband of a woman who inherited her fortune from her first husband. John Kerry hasn't worked an honest day in his entire life. Not one. And
hey,
so
he's
he's
work
telling,
if you can get it, Jim.
Well, it is good work. I guess gigolo is that work.
Whoa.
Or as AOC would say, a sex worker. That's
hey, it's real work.
Yeah, that's real work. Sex work is real work. That's what AOC said. Where was I? Oh yeah.
I just love that you're the communications director.
John Kerry.
Yeah.
You started it.
I did. So just the idea that these guys that they're in the pipe fitters union, for crying out loud. They're not in this making solar panels union. So John Kerry is so out of touch. He just thinks, hey, a worker's a worker. Those guys are no different than the guy who bags my groceries. I guess he can just go do something else. Right. This is the most insulting way to say learn to code I've ever seen. And we're only in week one of the Biden administration. And besides that, where do you think almost all of the solar panels that are used around the world made?
Yeah, China,
not in the United States. China, as 80%. Trump used to say.
Well, they're sending us to the gulags over there. It all makes perfect sense.
Right.
So
that's what
somebody that doesn't agree with them gets sent to They actually do this. They use the Uyghurs as slaves to make solar panels over there. The New York Times, of all papers, wrote about this a week or so ago.
Right.
And they use like a fun euphemism for it called forced labor. It's like, no, it's slavery. Let's not mince words. It's like that scene in Guardians of the Galaxy, like the last one where Jeff Goldblum is like, sir, the slaves are all armed. He's like, whoa. I don't like the S word. And they're like, sir, the prisoners with jobs. He's like, there we go.
That's pretty good. John Kerry is like, all these people that are out of this job because of the canceling of the Keystone XL Pipeline, go become a Uyghur forced laborer in China.
I mean, obviously we're joking about that, but
to Jim's
sentiment is.
But to Jim's point, the learn to code thing, how far removed are we when that was considered like borderline hate speech against journalists when they were like kind of people were lobbing that like learn to code thing at them because their newspapers were going out of business. It's like how far removed is this from that? It doesn't seem that far. It's just
well, our journalists were very uncritical about this whole thing. There weren't any stories really very critical of John Kerry. They just reported it straight. You have to follow conservative blogs or conservative journalists on Twitter to kind of get the full context of this, or to even share clips. I bet the clip wasn't shared by too many in the mainstream media, but it would be quite different if somehow some arbitrary executive order eliminated, say, the top 5 public newspapers, the top 5 publications in the United States, and all these journalists were out of work. I think their attitude might be a little bit different if it was their own ass on the line.
Sure.
But they don't. There is, our elite media class is as out of touch with the pipe fitters that were putting together the Keystone XL Pipeline as John Kerry is.
Right.
They don't care. They're part of the system that is broken right now. But you can't, just because a worker is a worker is a worker. I mean, God, that's almost Soviet thinking at this point. But you can't transfer the idea that you would even remotely believe that like the highly skilled labor that is a pipe fitter can just be moved to solar panel construction, which we're not going to do in this country, manufacturing, I should say. Yeah. But I guess at best Kerry was saying, well, all you guys can just install solar panels like on rooftops and things like that. It's like, well, there's probably a rooftop union out there somewhere that might have a word or two about having those jobs transferred to another union. But how about just letting the market work? We are now going back into a society, an American society, in which the people that are at the top levels of our government think that they have the expertise and the knowledge to make all of the industrial decisions that the market used to make efficiently. And it's going to be a disaster.
So another thing, so this wasn't the only thing that he did. He's done a number of things in terms of energy policy, Joe Biden, I mean. Joe Biden, I don't know if this article is like a little old, but it says Biden prepares to end new oil and coal leases on federal land. Isaac, is that official yet, or are they still just talking about it, as far as you're aware?
So I think that they're moving forward on it, but they have done some carve-outs for Native American tribes, which is actually really good because the Ute tribe in Utah, I believe, was like, hey, we get a lot of our funding from hydrocarbon production, and you don't have the authority to do that because we have sovereign land. And boy, howdy, do we never hear from them in the media, right? Like, I'm just so sick of the way that the stuff is reported on. Like, during the Dakota Access Pipeline protest, like, they were saying, oh, well, the pipeline's going near the reservation. It's not on the reservation. It's a half mile away from the reservation. Yet you're claiming, like, this is going straight through the land there. Wow. And then like you have a tribe that's saying, look, these hydrocarbons are an important part of our economy. It's how we fund our schools, our hospitals, et cetera, and everyone just kind of shrugs.
Yeah. Well, I'm reading this article. It says Joe Biden is poised to suspend the sale of oil and gas leases on federal land, which accounts for about a tenth of U.S. supplies, according to 4 people familiar with the matter. The move would block the sale of new mining and drilling rights across 700 million acres of federal land. It could also block offshore oil and gas leasing, though details are still being developed, some people said.
Yeah, I think they put in something like to the extent possible. So they left themselves some wiggle room. And I saw some people from the oil and gas industry kind of touting that. And I'm like, you went from having somebody who said, drill, baby, drill, to touting the benefits of wiggle room. You know what I mean? Like, I just hate how squirmy they have to be in order to survive in this environment. So
yeah, it says federal lands and waters together accounted for 22% of U.S. oil production and 12% of U.S. natural gas production in 2019, according to the Energy Information Administration. Onshore federal lands provide about 8% of the nation's oil and 9% of the natural gas, according to the Bureau of Land Management. So I was reading through some of this and assuming that all of this is going in place, which I think is a pretty safe assumption. It says that because it's just new leases, there's already been leases doled out to some of these companies that develop on federal lands.
Yep.
That like those leases that have already been doled out are going to like sustain these companies for a couple of years.
Yep.
Even if this ban were to go into place today, we might not necessarily see the effects of it for a couple of years. That's correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding from what you just said. Like immediately, or admittedly, I didn't do a lot of research for the pod today. Sorry, listeners.
Oh my God.
But this is going to hurt states like New Mexico the most because they have a lot of federal land, and I think something absurd like 30%, 33% plus of their general fund revenue comes from oil and gas development in the Permian Basin. So we've got Mr. I'm going to ban fracking on federal land going to New Mexico saying, look at all the jobs I created in the solar industry when all these, these roughnecks and people that work on the oil rigs like, oh, well, I'm unemployed and I'm not happy. So I don't know. I had a lot of schadenfreude when I heard all of these things. It was just kind of like elections have consequences. And I know that's not helpful, but.
Sure. Well, I want you to put on your little prognostication hat for a minute here, because I'm looking at this one quote that says, oil industry's advocates argue that drilling blockades do nothing to stifle emissions, just shift the crude oil production elsewhere. Quote, the world is still going to need natural gas and oil under any scenario for a long time, said Senior Vice President of the Independent Petroleum Association of America. A leasing ban is just going to ship that production to Saudi Arabia, to Russia, where there is far less stringent environmental controls. So taking this into account, a ban on federal land leases, the Keystone XL Pipeline being shut down, all of that stuff, is this going to lead, maybe it'll take a few years, but is this going to lead to the end of U.S. energy independence?
I don't think so. I think that they are limited in what they can do on private land. And yes, a lot of the offshore is all federal, and there is a lot of federal land that's being developed. They can't change the fact that the oil and gas is still in the ground. And I think that they're going to feel pressure if the price of gasoline hits $3.50 a gallon. And I think if that happens and we have somebody who's running on the platform of, hey, remember $2 a gallon gas? Let's go back there. Yeah. I think that those are the sorts of economic pressures that can, remind people of how good they've had it over the last few years. Like when you think about it, it's almost been 7 years of $2 gas, right? So yeah, right. I remember looking at oil prices back when I was at Heartland in like 2014. It went up to $113 a barrel, and then within a month it was like 20. Because the impact of the shale revolution had finally caught up to global oil markets. And then Saudi Arabia and Russia were like, oh, we got to try and kill this thing. So they like flooded the market with more oil. And now it's just kind of a stalemate. So in the short term, it'll hurt American oil producers. Absolutely. But I think long term, I don't think that that's a sustainable way to go about implementing energy policy. And I think the economic pressures, if you cede all of this market share back to Russia and Saudi Arabia, they have the ability to jack up prices again. That was the greatest thing about fracking, was that it busted OPEC's monopoly. We became the biggest producer of oil in the world, and they had to play ball with us again in a way that they didn't have to previous to the fracking revolution. So
yeah. Well, I'm kind of interested in the kind of the timelines of all this. I was listening to the radio like earlier today, and they were talking about what is the political stars aligning for the midterm elections in 2 years and all of that, and whether or not there's going to be some type of rebound, all of these questions being put into place. But then I'm reading this article talking about how it might be more than 2 years from now that we actually see the impact of some of these energy things that Joe Biden's doing. And I just wonder if it might be too late by the time 2 years rolls around. It might be too late for these effects on the gas prices, seeing it's $3. Like, what if we don't see that for a couple of years? It seems like the effect and the results, the cause and the result are almost too distant for people to kind of correlate them.
Maybe to some extent, but in oil and gas producing states, they will know, right? Because that's going to be exactly what's on the radio, the campaign ads. That's what it's going to be all about. And, if it takes a few years for it to start to make a difference, then I don't know if that necessarily matters, because you have all of these swing districts in the United States, and they kind of went 50-50 in terms of, red or blue this go around, right? And the odds are that the Republicans probably retake the House in 2022, just because that's the way that midterm elections generally go. But the most part, the thing that you have to remember is this isn't really an active Congress that's doing this. This is the executive slow rolling, permitting, or saying that they're not going to have these things. So like the executive, the president has so much power these days when it comes to approving permits through the bureaucracy that it matters less who's in control of Congress.
Let me just posit this idea. If Biden wanted to utterly destroy the oil and gas industry in the United States, what would he be doing differently than he's done already in the first week? I'd argue that he wouldn't have done much different at all. And the idea that I've heard people say, federal lands only account for about 10% of U.S. oil and gas production. It's like, yeah, only 10%. Tell you what, let's take away 10% of the food you eat every day, and let's see what your body looks like after another week. Let's take 10% of your salary away and look at what your lifestyle is going to be after about a month. I saw, I guess it was only 3 weeks to a month ago, even here in high tax Illinois, gas was $1.98 or $1.99 a gallon, and now it's $2.50, and I don't expect to see it under $2 again, at least through the Biden administration. We were told when President Trump came into office, he said, I'm going to make America great again. And one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to make America energy independent again. And the entire society and system told Donald Trump that that's not possible. You can't do that. And what happened? We did become energy independent again. And in fact, we became a global leader in oil and natural gas production. And it affected foreign policy. It gave us better leverage against countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia. It helped. I'm sure it had, the fact that America was a global economic power, especially in the fossil fuel industry, helped. I'm sure it had to have helped the Trump administration basically have peace break out in the Middle East all over the place, which is something no one ever talks about anymore. But now, these things will have consequences. I think we will not be energy independent again very soon. I'm not as much of an expert on energy economics and the global energy economy like Isaac Orr is. But I don't think it's so you can just so easily just blow this off. It's like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's only 10% or it's 5% or only 8%. This is just the beginning. This is, my motto, I should put it on my business cards. I joked the other day. It's always going to get worse. Everything always gets worse. And so this is the beginning of his anti-energy policies, and there will be more. And what I think, and this kind of loops back to where we started this entire podcast, talking about kind of the nexus between big business and government, is that I think just today, General Motors,
Government Motors, Jim.
You're right. Government Motors announced that they are going to, I think they announced they're going to stop making the internal combustion engine in their vehicles in 2035. They'll only be making electric vehicles.
They said that was their goal. Yeah.
It was their goal. Right. So they're doing that.
Definitely played it. I'm sorry. I talked over you. I did not mean to do that. They played it off as if they were like making this bold announcement that they were no longer going to be doing anything that wasn't electric. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, why are they doing that? They're doing that because the government can punish them if they don't play ball. And so you have this nexus between big government and the central planners who think they can know how to run an entire economy, working hand in hand, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, corporations that feel like they have to play ball with these radicals in government in order to still exist in another 10 years. And you can even be given them more benefit of the doubt and say they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to play ball with the government that can put them out of business. And so here we have these choices have consequences. And so when you reduce oil and natural gas exploration in the United States, that will have an effect on oil prices and it will have an effect on jobs. This is a ripple effect all the way through. These things matter. So I think this is actually a very big deal, and it's a very bad deal for America, and we're going to start feeling it. Whether or not, we spent basically 8 years of $4 to $5 a gallon of gas in many places in this country during the Obama years, and then we got, it was a blessing. We got used to it down to $2 or $2.50 a gallon for the entire time Trump was president. And we are going to see $4 or $5 a gallon gasoline, and a lot sooner than a lot of people think.
Ugh. Yeah, and probably getting us even closer to that is this desire from a lot of the left and climate alarmists for Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency. So there's this article here that I'm reading off of that's from The Hill that says Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer said on Monday night that President Biden should consider declaring an emergency when it comes to climate. Quote, "It might be a good idea for President Biden to call a climate emergency," Schumer told MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. Schumer appeared to be referencing Biden making a national emergency declaration, with the Senate leader noting that former President Trump used it for a border wall. Quote, "He can do many, many things under the emergency powers that he could not do without legislation." Schumer added about what authority Biden would have if he used the emergency powers. So it seems like there's, Chuck Schumer's not the only person. In a previous episode, I talked about a couple of different organizations that are trying to push Biden to declare a emergency, which would basically allow him to allocate certain funds to, pursue climate alarmist agenda type things. So Jim, you're probably more of a pessimist on this, but I would assume you think that this is just a matter of time before he does this.
I think it's just a matter of time before he does this. I think, if it's one thing that the COVID pandemic has taught us, is that an executive can declare an emergency at any time for basically any reason and for an unlimited amount of time. And if you were to believe the rhetoric of Joe Biden and his administration and his supporters, that in fact, Gina McCarthy, now I lose track of all the titles. She's not the EPA administrator anymore, or as she was under Obama, but she's some other kind of unaccountable climate czar. I think she might be the domestic climate czar, while John Kerry is the international climate czar. Anyway, Gina McCarthy said that the climate crisis is the most existential health threat in the United States. So I guess COVID has been downgraded because climate change is now the greatest threat. And I stole that joke from Phil Kerpen on Twitter, so I want to give him credit. That's pretty funny. So COVID has been downgraded because climate change is the biggest threat to human health around the world. So they believe these things, and if they actually do believe these things, why wouldn't you call a climate emergency? If it's the existential threat that they say it is, you would have to declare an emergency, logically, right? Because you have to save the planet. We can't wait anymore. So declare a climate emergency and basically implement all the policies that are necessary to save the planet and to save the lives of literally billions of people around the world. If their rhetoric is to be believed, a climate emergency declaration and then basically policy by fiat is next.
Isaac, what do you think? Do you think that it's just a matter of time before we see this declaration?
I don't know. Like, once you do that, it becomes a new war on terror, right? Like, it's kind of the thing. It's a big step. I don't doubt that it'll happen. I kind of hope it won't. Would they need congressional authorization for that or not? I don't know.
Your guess is as good as mine. Jim, I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Do not. What's the answer? What's the question again? I was texting you something, to be honest. So
sure. Question? So I was just wondering if they would need congressional authorization to declare the climate emergency. Like, I know in Minnesota, the legislature gave the governor the emergency powers initially, but he has the power to retain them indefinitely, which is insane. Right. So yeah, I would
think no, you wouldn't need a congressional. I don't think I'd have to look into it, but I don't think you need a congressional approval to declare an emergency. I mean, normally presidents declare emergencies after a natural disaster. They don't need Congress to tell them to do that. So, and that when you do that, that opens up all of these new, or I should say, loosens up regulations.
Oh, we're losing you, Jim.
We're losing them.
Yeah. Well, it's it's the end of the podcast pretty much anyways. But Isaac, I want to give you the last word on kind of all this energy stuff with Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were out there like trying to beat the bushes for the $2 trillion of spending that they want to put on that. And welcome to the Green New Deal, everybody. It's going to be wild. We're going for a California style ride, and y'all deserve it.
Okay, wow. It's pretty blunt. All right, folks. I think that'll pretty much do it for this episode. Obviously, we're a pretty energy and environmental, Like that's one of the things that we cover a lot on this podcast. So surely we'll be talking about this as there's further developments. But that'll do it for this episode of In the Tank. If you like our show, please subscribe or review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. Find us on everything: Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, YouTube, pretty much everything nowadays. Don't follow us on Twitter. Twitter is dead. If you want to send us your comments, suggestions, questions, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
People can find me at JLakely on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
And Isaac Orr, same question.
You can find me on Wall Street Better.
Isaac,
Wall Street Bets, sorry.
You look like a reservoir dog with that suit and tie like that.
Bark, bark.
Not really relevant. All right, thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.